podcast we'll be looking at writing a formal and an informal letter. So the idea of this is that we don't want the examiner to have this facial expression when he's looking at your letters. We want him to be impressed and thinking that you are a C and hopefully be an A student. So here's a typical exam question you will be getting. This is last year's, this is 2014, summer 2014 question, and it tells you up here is 20 marks. All the writing questions are 20 marks. Remember, you get 2 questions in the hour. The exam's at 40, both of them are evenly weighted at 20. And then it always says here, the quality of your writing is more important than its length. You should write about 1 to 2 pages in your answer book. So basically, rule of thumb, you should be looking to write a page and a half. It should reflect 30 minutes or 25 minutes writing. Formal letter then, address you're writing from, then the date again out in full, then their address. So unlike the informal one, you put their address. Name or polite greeting. In the exam, they normally do give you the name, so use it if they give you. Otherwise, dear sir or madam. Say why you were writing. Then the main point of the letter. And you're going to have, so in that main paragraphs, you'll have 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 paragraphs, making 1 point in each. And then conclusion, so what you want to happen. So for example, if you're writing about a complaint to the train service, what do you want the train manager to do? You don't just want him to read it and politely put it into the bin. You want him to either give you a ring, you want a refund, you would like 50% off, you would like him to call you personally. Then yours faithfully. So the structure of your letter should be your addresses, your greeting, your introduction, and then you can make 3 main points. And then the third one, I like you to do something called second guessing, which if you're in the lesson, you will know. If not, I will talk about later. And then perhaps in your paragraph 4, you can talk about the other side of the view. So if you're talking about a complaint, maybe you could just show the other side of the argument and then conclude with yours faithfully or yours sincerely. So with every piece of writing you're going to do in Unit 2, and also when you're doing the reading exams in Unit 1, I would like you to think about the POW. So we have talked about this, so it's purpose, audience, language, layout. So whenever you get a question, I want you to think of those 4 things. So the purpose of the letter. So if we just talk about the last one, when they're trying to give you a convincing case to the train manager, the purpose would be to persuade, but it also could be to inform or to advise. So the audience intended in my letter will be, therefore you've got to decide, and if you're doing a letter, if it's going to be formal or informal. So your language, you're going to write formally or informally, but also you should be including everything to do with deforest, which we have talked about, and spammo, which we have talked about. And then the letter should be set out or laid out like a letter should be. So to start a formal letter, it's dear sir or madam, and if you have the name, dear, if it's if it's Paul Jones, so dear Mr. Jones. If it's a woman, if you don't know if she's married or you don't know if she's a miss, then you put Ms, so dear MS Jones. So dear, yours sincerely, if you know the person's name. If you don't know the person's name, it's dear sir or madam, yours faithfully. So when you're doing your planning in your exam, I will talk about planning at the later stage in this podcast, but when you actually do your plan, I don't want you to scribble it out when you get into the exam. I want you to have your plan at the top of your question, and then maybe if you bring a pencil into the exam, just lightly draw one line through it. So the examiner, 1, knows that the plan is not actually part of your answer, but 2, the examiner sees your plan and thinks to himself or herself, okay, wow, so this person's got a very good structure. They've tried to have a logical ideas in their answer, and they may give you a point, or just maybe might add to your points at the end when they think to themselves how good your answer has been. So I have also talked about this. So you've got to make sure your paragraphs are linked. So that's one thing that people didn't really do in their controlled assessment. So for example, here are some connectives here. Furthermore, on the other hand, additionally, in conclusion. But if we look at this one, if we want to structure, so if we are structuring our paragraphs, but perhaps you could start it with firstly, or secondly, or finally. Okay, so these are just ways of linking your paragraphs so your paragraphs aren't totally alien to each other. So for example, if you're talking about the train complaint and you talk about a paragraph about how dreadful the staff is, and you want to go on to another point about how bad something was, you could put equally, likewise, in the same way. Furthermore, if you're talking about a train service was really bad, but then maybe you were mentioning that something was good, you could say, however, on the other hand, so you could talk about all the food being warm and the food being dreadful, but then you could say, on the other hand, the staff are very helpful. On the contrary, the staff are very helpful. Conversely, my friends and I had actually had a good time on the trip. So you've got to make sure if you want to get your high marks, you've got to link your paragraphs. Also, to get high marks in the letter question, you've got to make sure that your form is correct. So this is to make sure that you understand and you know the layout of a letter. Okay, so for example, you need to know where your addresses go, you need to know capital letters, and you start with Dear Mr. or Ms. So like I said earlier, you must be using your deforest in your language. You've got to show off, you've got an hour in that writing exam to show off to the examiner what you know. So there's no point of us learning this for a last year, doing it really well, being fantastic at using all these techniques. If you get into the letter and you think, oh, I won't use these, I want you to use them. Not every single sentence, but I want you to show that you know the examiner. You show to the examiner that you know how to use these things. So in your letter, you should be using rhetorical questions. You should be using emotive language. You should be made up statistics. Remember, we've talked about that you can make up your statistics. So 97% of the people who used your train did not like your service. Okay, so alliteration. The staff were stupidly silly. Okay, second guessing. So I have talked about this, so this is basically anticipating how your reader will respond and argue against those points. So for example, another question I've seen is, the question is, you have to write a letter to your headmaster saying where the college should spend more money. So this particular student said that we need more laptops, we need more sports equipment, and the way you could second guess that is by seeing, well, the headmaster will maybe come back, if you say about laptops, by saying, well, students might lose the laptops. They might come back by saying they need more sports equipment, by saying that they can't afford more, that some students don't like sports. So if we're talking about the train question, you're talking about the trains are always late, the second guessing may be, well, I'm sorry, but we have faults on the line, or sometimes our trains break down. Another example could be, I know you may say that we have to train our staff when they first come, that when people are new they might make mistakes. However, you could say they were deeply rude to me, and there is no excuse for that. So in one paragraph you could start by second guessing your reader, and that will show the examiner that you are an A or B student. But this is a plan for the letter, so you can do just a plan of POW, but this is for another question on why students shouldn't be using school uniform. So I just made a few little points there, and I've also remembered to say that to use my deforest, to use punctuation, to use a wide vocabulary. Remember, I've always said to you as well, I want you to do the plan of the structure of the question, but I also want you to do a very quick 1-minute plan of your deforest planning. So for example, for the train question, we could do direct address as, do you have any idea how annoying? So remember, direct address is trying to catch the reader's attention by using the word you or we, so directly talking to that person. Alliteration, you could have, statistics first. You could have, unsurprisingly, 86% of your customers dislike your company. So that's done two things. One, we've started the sentence with a word ending in ly, which I've told you before I'd quite like you to try and do. And also we've used a statistics, which shows the examiner that you know how to write persuasively. Even though this is a made-up statistic, it doesn't matter. Alliteration, you're shockingly, should have a comma, shockingly surly staff. So again, it's catching the attention. I haven't done the others, but feel free to plan. So this should take just 1 or 2 minutes in the exam, and just plan your default, and you can almost tick them off as you put them into the letter, so you'll make sure you get them all in. Okay, so I've all given you a copy of this. So this is the Marc scheme. So like I've said before, it's out of 20. Like I said before, it's out of 20. 13 for how you write, 7 for your spelling, punctuation and grammar. So to get your 13, you've got to do your POW. You've got to make sure you write a formal letter if you're asked to do it. You've got to make sure your arguments are mature. You've got to link your paragraphs, which we've talked about in the connectives. You've got to use extended vocab, and then down here it says using a range of stylistic devices. So this is all the things that we've talked about in deforest, and also ambitious vocab, which you should try to use. In your SPAG, your spelling, punctuation, grammar, we've talked about that a lot of you are here for your controlled assessments. However, if you want to go to band 3 and band 4, you've got to do different things. So we have talked about using, beginning a sentence with 2 adjectives and a comma. Maybe starting a sentence with a rhetorical question or using rhetorical questions. Maybe using, well, definitely using different sentence structure. So using simple, compound and complex sentences. Using advanced punctuation, so commas and semicolon. Okay, so you should all have these for any piece of writing. So I've tried to give you the ones so far. This is the checklist for the letter. So you should be using the deforest, and here's a bit of an explanation of deforest. You should be using POW and deforest for your 2 plans, and then various stuff here. So connectives, use 2 adjectives or word ending in ly to start a sentence, which I'll have a look at in the A-star example in a minute. So what's your clear purpose? In this example, it's to persuade. Sentence structure, interesting opening. Like I said before, I do not want anyone to start with I don't want anyone to start with I am writing this letter because. Straight away, I've told you, if they see that, they will straight away, it's almost like a brand on your head saying, or a stamp on your head saying, D student. Try to come up with an interesting way to start it. So create facts and statistics, second guess the reader, appropriate closing. So I've got some exam examples for you. So to get a perfect A-star, this is an example. It's a perfect answer, 20 out of 20. So first of all, we can see that it's basically set out very well, isn't it? It's set out like a formal letter should look. And then, so if we go through it, so it starts off by saying, responsible and mature, the young adults at Vunder School are eagerly looking for ways to prove just how trustworthy they are. Will you give them the chance? Clearly, this is a great opportunity for you to strengthen your relationship with the student body, because you are undoubtedly a busy man. I will get straight to the point, I'm writing today to ask you to consider the abolishment of school uniform. So if we look closely at that first paragraph, it starts off straight away, responsible and mature, with 2 adjectives. It uses eagerly, which is a very emotive word, so it uses emotive language. And then down here, will you give them a chance? Rhetorical question. Clearly, so it uses an interesting sentence starter ending in ly. And then he says, because you're undoubtedly a busy man, I will get straight to the point. So he uses a connective with a complex sentence. Then he finishes it with, I'm writing today to ask you. So I don't mind if you actually you're dying to cram the phrase in, I'm writing today. That's fine. But I want to leave it to the end of the first paragraph. At the start of the paragraph, make it interesting, make it more interesting to read. The examiner will see 200 exam questions, and he will see hundreds, he or her will see hundreds and hundreds of I'm writing this because. So please make yours try to stand out. Okay, so a lot of deforest here. So if we go down, in a recent Vunder School survey, 85% of students said they want to wear their own clothes to school. And then lots of rhetorical questions, lots of emotive language, made up statistic again, semicolon. Okay. So quickly, as we go back up, I want to look at this sentence here. Because you are undoubtedly a busy man, I will get straight to the point. So I actually think for most piece of writing, I actually think this is a great phrase. If you try to remember this phrase, the great thing to try to get into your piece of work. So if this was a speech, if this was a letter, or maybe if it was, well, not so much an article or review report, but speech or a letter, if you try to get into this phrase, I will get straight to the point, I'm writing today, blah, 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 blah. I would say that's a fantastic one here to try to get in. Okay, so talking about second guessing, it then starts this paragraph with, I imagine you will say that school uniform encourages good behaviour, but I disagree. And then he goes on to say why he disagrees. So again, second guessing, that would be a fantastic line to get into your paragraph. So if you're getting a question on write a formal letter to another complaint, you could say, I imagine you will say that staff behaviour is normally good, but I disagree. So second guessing. So there's a lot of complex sentences, lots of rhetorical question, and then down here it says you see, their clothes are expressing their individuality. So he's using the D of deforest there, direct address to reader. Okay. So then another technique begins with 2 rhetorical questions, direct address again. And down here it uses powerful 3. So America is the richest, 1, most powerful, 2, and most successful nation in the world, 3. So good use of power of 3 there. We go to why it's so good, another 3 points why. So second guessing, which I talked about throughout the letter. The writer anticipates how the headmaster will respond and preemptively argues against those points. So we've talked about that. Different uses of sentences. So the two adjective openings and adverb openings are used occasionally, as is a short sentence for effect. So I have not talked about that one. So he uses long sentences, but then he uses a short sentence for effect. And then he makes, the whole writing is quite complex, so it's not just sort of blasé or sort of simple points. He does go into quite a lot of depth. Then hopefully you should know how to write a letter now, or at least giving you a few revision tips on it. Feel free to ask me anything either in the YouTube comment box or in person or an email. But hopefully that's given you good tips for the exam on June the 2nd. Thanks.